This is Investment Trains, brought to you courtesy of the Zambia Development Agency and ZNBC. Well, it is a known fact that industrialization has been instrumental in the economic development of the world, as it has improved productivity and allowed for mass production, which has resulted, of course, into improved standards of living. It is against this background that the government of the Republic of Zambia has come up with the concept of the multi-facility economic zones to promote industrialization, especially in the manufacturing sector and related sectors. This week on the program, we shall endeavor to understand the concept of the multi-facility economic zones, their developmental operations, and the impact in contributing to economic development. My guest is Mr. John Zulu, ZDA Acting Manager, Investment Promotions. Sir, it's good to have you in the studio.
Thank you so much.
Just help us understand the concept behind these multi-facility economic zones.
Okay, thank you so much. First, I need to mention that the concept of multi-facility economic zones is a concept that the government of the Republic of Zambia has been pursuing, aimed at purely, fostering industrialization in the country. This is a concept that we've been pursuing as a country from just about the year 2006. So what that entails is that government has enacted legislation that basically supports the development of those multi-facility economic zones. Now, as I talk about multi-facility economic zones, I'll also be loosely referring to what we also term as industrial parks. Industrial parks and multi-facility economic zones are basically related concepts. It's just the terms of when you look at how they operate, there are little differences between the way they operate, but generally the concept is the same, the objectives are the same. So this is something that the government has been pursuing from the year 2006, and purely it's industrialization.
Well, beautiful. I know that industrialization was one of the first endeavors that the world embarked on, world economies I'm referring to. But is this the best practice for us to venture in?
Well, it is actually a very good practice. And I'm saying this based on what, on the results that have been achieved elsewhere in the world. There are big economic players in the world currently that have benefited greatly from this concept. So, for example, I'll talk about China, I'll talk about India, I'll talk about Malaysia. These are the leaders, in this type of conceptualization. So, if you look at China particularly, if you look at last year, 2019. If you look at the contribution of MFEZ to the GDP, they contributed up to about 20% of the GDP. So that just goes to show you, the impact that these multi-facility economic zones, or like they like to call them, special economic zones. That's the impact that they can give. So if you look at the Zambian scenario, pretty much this is what we are trying to achieve. We might not have achieved the results as much as our friends who pioneered these multi-facility economic zones or special economic zones, but that is what we aspire to do.
Let me just bring you up speed to the role the Zambia Development Agency is playing in ensuring that these programs are brought to fruition.
Okay, so the Zambia Development Agency, first of all, like we are the prime investment promotion agency of the country. So what it is that government, through the ZDA Act number 11 of 2006, gave the mandate to the Zambia Development Agency to create these MFEZs. And then through another statutory instrument, which was number 56 of the year 2007, the guidelines were given in terms of how then we would administer and regulate these MFEZs. So under the Zambia Development Agency, we've got an MFEZ department, and the MFEZ department basically, the role is firstly to facilitate the creation of these MFEZs. then also to administer these MFEZs. Then finally, our role is to regulate the MFEZs. So we basically, the whole mandate to do with MFEZs sits with the Zambia Development Agency. You have private MFEZs, you have government-controlled MFEZs, but the role to create and monitor and regulate is basically sitting with the Zambia Development Agency.
Let's quickly look at what it entails or what it takes really to set up an MFEZ.
Okay, so the most important thing is that first of all, you need to have land. You need to be sure you've got a piece of land to which you've got title. That is very key. Then secondly, you need to sure that you've formulated the master plan. So the master plan will talk to things like what type of industries you'd want to have in the MFEZ. You also talk about the type of infrastructure you are going to set up. You know, for you to run an MFEZ, you need, first of all, to be sure that there's basic infrastructure that has been established. So you talk about the roads. You talk about, in some cases, the buildings you should have set up, you know, erected some buildings. You talk about the telecommunication system. You talk about water issues. You talk about power. You need to be sure that you have put in the basic infrastructure that makes it easy for an investor to come in and set up in the multi-facility economic zone. Now, maybe at this point, let me also mention that the idea is that the environment in the multi-facility economic zone should be so much better than the environment that is outside. We need to find a way to attract investors to come into the multi-facility economic zone, and purely the attraction is either through the infrastructure that has been set up, which should be much better than what you find outside, but also through the incentives that are offered to companies that are setting up in the multi-facility economic zone. So those two conditions should make it more attractive for somebody to set up in the zone than outside of the economic zone.
Let's just indulge us with incentives.
Yes.
Falling in love with so much when you talk about incentives. Let's look at the incentives for those who are likely to set up or operate in an MFEZ.
Okay. So currently, the incentives that apply, first of all, there are issues to do with you know, customs duty. If you're bringing in equipment and you want to set up in a multi-facility economic zone, that equipment is supposed to come in duty-free. So you don't pay any customs duty, 100% exemptions. Then also there are issues to do with capital allowances that will apply. So if somebody is coming in and let's say, for example, they come in and they are investing $10 million in capital equipment, the expectation then is that because you've set up in the zone, in the first year of your financial year, the first financial year, you are allowed to apply depreciation 100% in the first financial year. Now, that if you compare it to companies, you know, that are not registered with the ZDA, will not apply, because any companies that are not registered with the ZDA, the depreciation will apply over 5 years. So if you sort of, for lack of a better term, front load the depreciation, then that helps you for taxes, because normally that figure that you take into your books as depreciation is a huge figure for capital intensive projects, and that should might most likely take you into a loss, which you can then carry forward, you know, for another 5 years, depending on the industry. If it's energy, it can even go up to 12 years. But basically, those are the incentives that are there.
Well, beautiful. Just share with us some areas, locations where we have successfully established these economic zones, and you can also give some testimonies coming out from those zones.
Okay, all right. So maybe I'll start with Lusaka itself. We have in Lusaka what is called the Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone. The Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone is a government-owned economic zone. So what it is that there's about 2,100 hectares of land that has been set aside in Lusaka South, and that land is basically fenced, and the management of the zone has set up infrastructure in there. Companies have come and they set up quickly. I'll go through, the details in terms of what has been done and the achievements so far. But you have the Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone. Then we've got also the Lusaka East Multi-Facility Economic Zone. The Lusaka East Multi-Facility Economic Zone is owned by the Zambia China Cooperation Zone, which is the ZCCZ, which is basically Chinese owned. So these are the two multi-facility economic zones that are in Lusaka. But we also have, like I indicated earlier, what are called industrial parks. In Lusaka, we've got what is called the Roma Industrial Park. So in Lusaka, to summarize, we've got two MFEZs and one industrial park. Then we move on to the Copper Belt. We've got in Chambishi, the Chambishi Multi-Facility Economic Zone. Again, this one is Chinese owned by the same ZCCZ. In Dola, we've got the Sub-Sahara Gemstone Exchange. This one is owned by a private Zambian individual.
Beautiful.
Yes, basically this pretty much wraps up the ones that are operational. We've got the Lumwana MFEZ, but the Lumwana MFEZ, much as it was declared, it is not yet functional, so to speak. So I would not want to go so much into that. But if you want to know now in terms of what has been achieved in those MFEZs, you will please just let me quickly go through some of these statistics that we have. So if you look at the Chambishi MFEZ, which I said is in Chambishi, this one was set up in 2007. And so far, there are about 51 companies that have been attracted, in the MFEZ. Over just about 9,000 jobs have been created. Investment in infrastructure, and when I talk about infrastructure, it's the roads, the buildings that have been set up there, telecommunication network, and all those. Investment in that regard is just about $2.1 billion. So you can imagine how much investment these people have put into the MFEZ. In terms of the developer themselves, in terms of the developer, in terms of the actual investment owned by the developer themselves, it just comes to about $192 million. Then talking about the Lusaka East has got 15 companies that are operational at the moment. We've got the 1,190 jobs that have been created. We've got about $254.4 million investment by the investors in the zone. So now you need to make a distinction. There's that investment that is by the companies that have set up in the zone, but there's also the investment in the infrastructure. So in terms of the investment by the companies that have set up in the zone, it's sitting about $254 million as we speak. And the investment in infrastructure by the owners of the zone is sitting at $25 million. When we go to the government-owned Lusaka South Multi-Facility Economic Zone, there are 19 companies that have set up in there. They've created about 5,700 jobs. Investment by the companies that are there is about $354 million. And then $60.3 million has been invested in the infrastructure, by the zone management. I would also want to talk about the Sub-Sahara Industrial Park. This one was set up in 2010. There are 5 companies that are operating in there, 150 jobs created, $30 million invested by the companies that are in there. If we talk about the Roma Park, 20 companies have been attracted into the Roma Park, creating about 700 jobs. Actualized investment by the investors is sitting at $120 million, and the investment by the owners of the zone is about $20 million. So this just goes to show you that there's a lot of investment that has actually been actually happened in the zone, be it by the owners of the zone in terms of the infrastructure, as well as the investment by the companies that have been attracted into the zone. So all this just shows you, if you look at the number of jobs that have been created, there have been a lot of jobs that have been created, and you can see the impact of this investment.
Well, beautiful. Let me just remind the viewers that you are watching Investment Trends brought to you courtesy of the Zambia Development Agency and ZNBC. And of course, we are discussing the concept of multi-facility economic zones and the impact they're having on our economy, and of course, trying to ensure that we push industrialization. Mr. Jones, you have echoed quite well, and so much monies that are being put in terms of investments. But at what point do we get to see the results of these investments on the ordinary citizen?
Okay, in terms of the results, I think the results are already there to see. What I would love to actually appeal to the Zambians is that they need to take a bit of time to just familiarize themselves with the developments in some of these zones. I, for example, until I stepped a foot into the Lusaka South multi-facility zone, had no idea. I would hear about the multi-facility zone, but I had no idea what type of developments are there. So
not to cut you short, but I feel that that is the gap that has been created,
yes,
where the ordinary citizen doesn't seem to appreciate or to be looped in the development that is happening. So he feels it's for others and he's not part of it. And that's why I asked that question. At what point do you bridge the gap?
Okay, all right. So under the ZDA, part of our mandate, like I mentioned earlier, is to promote these investment opportunities. Now, when we look at these MFEZs, for us, it's an investment opportunity. Yeah. So it's part of the promotional material that we actually circulate. We normally expect, unfortunately, our situation is such that the people that take interest in some of these things mostly are the foreigners, because they are the ones who come in with a lot of money and they want to set up. The good thing, again, to report just now is that government, through the budgetary pronouncements that have been made for next year, has indicated that the investment thresholds for people that are coming in to set up in the multi-facility zones will be differentiated this time, meaning that, for example, if somebody is coming in as a foreigner, the minimum investment will be $500,000 in the multi-facility economic zone. But you, as a local, you will be required to get only up to about $100,000. What we are hoping for is that then the Zambians can look at it as an opportunity that they can take, they can take advantage of. We are thinking that maybe the $500,000 look like it was something that was way, way beyond their reach, and hence the lack of interest in the same.
Probably when you're looking at it from the Kwacha point of things.
Yes, of course, of course, of course. But we are hoping that now, with that preferential treatment that has been given to the Zambians, more Zambians can take advantage of the same, so that we can see more locally owned companies in the economic zone. But what I would advise is that, please, all this information in terms of what these multi-facility zones have contributed to the economy in terms of jobs, in terms of the industrialization that we were talking about, all this information is sitting with us at the ZDA, and you can find it on our website.
Well, this is why this program.
Yes.
that's the reason why I'm sitting here,
yes,
ensuring that I interrogate the process so that
yes,
ZDA can open up its doors. And I know you've got an open door policy, because Acting Director General was here and he did elaborate on what you are doing. But to carry on, let's find out what type of investment are you looking out for in these zones? Okay.
Now, in terms of the investment, each zone has got its own regulations. If I take you back, I'd mentioned that the administration of, or the guidelines pertaining to know how we deal with these zones is enshrined in the law. So there is an act that actually gives you the guidelines. So, for example, if you look at the Lusaka South multi-facility economic zones, the multi-facility economic zone, what you find is that the companies that are permitted to operate in there might not necessarily be the same companies that are permitted to operate in the Lusaka East. So, as the developers present to us as ZDA their master plan, in the master plan, it stipulates the type of industries. So if it's heavy duty industries or light industries, those are stipulated in the multi-facility economic zone. For example, there are certain huge investments that are there in the Lusaka South multi-facility zone, which can never be permitted, to set up in the Lusaka East Mount Facility Zone, purely because of the act, the statutory instrument that set up these facilities. So even us as a ZDA, because our role is to regulate, what will happen is that if somebody comes in and says, no, I want to set up in the Lusaka Mount Facility Economic Zone, we look at what type of industry that is. And we see, well, let's look at the master plan. What does the law say in terms of what is permissible to be set up in the Lusaka Mount Facility, Lusaka South Mount Facility Economic Zone? If it does not meet those requirements, unfortunately, we cannot give you a permit. Let me emphasize here that all companies that operate in Mount Facility Economic Zones have to be given permits by the Zambia Development Agency. So if we find that you do not qualify because of the nature of the business to be in those zones, unfortunately, we will not give the permit.
Of course, you have spoken about regulations and ZDA doing the regulation.
Yes.
But let's look at the monitoring. And
Yes.
of course, the monitoring is what is essential so that we understand and appreciate that these companies are not going overboard or are not doing practices that are against what government and the constitution of the land stipulates. Let's look at how you are monitoring these zones.
Okay. So first of all, I'll talk about what exactly we are monitoring. First of all, like I indicated, we have the guidelines about what type of industries are being set up in there.
Yes.
So number one, when we do our monitoring, those are the things that we go to check. Are you abiding by those guidelines? Yes. Then number two, some of the we will go there and look at the issues to do with the targets that you set for yourselves. When you gave us the master plan, you indicated that there's so much of infrastructure that you'd want to set up in that particular Mount Facility Zone. Now, those targets are what we come and monitor. Are you actually achieving your targets? Are they on time? If there are issues, then you bring out the issues so that then as an investment facilitating agency, promotion agency, our job then will be to say, okay, if they're having these challenges, how do we come in? So number one is the issue to say about, it's issues to do with the type of industries, also the targets. Now, the targets could be issues like, for example, the road network. You could have stated that by 2021, we will have done 50 kilometers of road network in the zone. So our role now is to check, are you on target? If you're not on target, what are the issues? If you said that no, you are going to set up telecommunication infrastructure, are you on target? All those issues. Issues to do with job creation. If you told us at some point that you know, at full capacity maybe, or even midway, you'll have created so many jobs. Our role when we are doing the monitoring is to say, okay, this is what you promised. Where are we now? And what is it? What has gone wrong? What can we do to help the situation? Now, in terms of how often we do it, normally we're supposed to do the monitoring twice in a year. So we'd have the first year, you do a physical, monitoring. You arrange with the owners of the MFEZ for you to get to sit down and see what developments have happened in the last 6 months, as well as just get to tour the zone, just to get a feel of whatever changes could have happened during this period.
Mr. John Zulu, it was awesome having you on the program, and I'm sure my viewers out there have appreciated your wealth of information in terms of promotions, investment promotions in these economic zones, and I appreciate you for coming through. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for hosting me. Maybe just to close,
yes, sir.
It's just an appeal, like I indicated. We have reduced the thresholds for Zambians in terms of investment thresholds for them to get an investment license from the ZDA to actually set up in these Mount Facility Economic Zones. So I'm hoping that with the $100,000 compared to the 500 that was previously there, we can have more investment from Zambians who would want to walk into an economic zone and see more Zambian-owned companies than what is currently prevailing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much. Well, it's been Investment Trains brought to you courtesy of the Zambia Development Agency and ZNBC. And I've been your host, Hezron Ngosa. See you and God bless you.